There's something about Remnant Protocol that reminds me of the old school space games. Some of the best space games ever made, whether that's X-Wing vs TIE Fighter or the likes of Free Space 2. As you watch this, let me know in the comments section if you feel the same way. Now, it's nice to see this type of space game returning. This one should be available in the fourth quarter of 2025. And Canadian developers, Progenitor Game Studios, well, they believe they have an answer to making not only a great space game, but combining it with another fantastic genre as well, that is the XCOM series. On top of that, all of this is going to be playing out inside VR. That's right, this is a VR title coming to both the MetaQuest as well as PC VR at the same time. I do believe that a regular flat screen version should be following up at a later date. Now, developers Progenitor announced the game back in 2022 with the kind of hopeful Kickstarter pitch that often vanishes into vapor. At that stage, it was a purely flat-screen project, hard-edged dogfighting married to a turn-based strategy game where you juggled research, recruitment and logistics. The campaign cleared its modest target, that's the Kickstarter campaign, and the prototype then took off and the three developers pressed on. But the maths were brutal. Towards the end of 2023, they hinted that a major partner had arrived to help them out financially. It's now been confirmed that that partner is none other than Meta. They signed on as the VR publisher just before Christmas of that year. The consequences were immediate. Funding was allowed the studio to quadruple in size. Every line of code, every cockpit texture could be pushed to the next level with a team that they'd imagined on paper but couldn't quite put into practice. Crucially, Meta's contract left creative control intact. Progenitor insisted that from day one, there would be no aggressive monetization, no thinning of the mechanics to suit a casual crowd. In other words, they wanted to maintain a build in the game that they'd initially set out to build. The company's public update spelled it out. Remnant Protocol would still be the deep, systems-driven space sim that its backers had paid for, just better resourced. Of course, better resourced often means delayed. A 2024 ship date slipped first to holiday 2024 at the earliest, but that's now slipped to a much safer Q4 2025. Yet the extra time here appears to really be paying off. The game now supports HOTAS, for example, on PC, a fully interactive cockpit as well on Quest, and a single-player campaign tracking at roughly 20 hours. And that's actually pretty long when it comes to VR titles, isn't it? Now, Meta here gains a heavyweight sim to showcase the power jump from Quest 2 to Quest 3, whilst Progenitor themselves secure distribution on the largest headset ecosystem without sacrificing a Steam VR audience, because yes, it will still be coming to PC. For the moment, PlayStation VR 2 is not on the cards, a somewhat predictable, I guess, casualty of Meta's publishing check here. Of course, that's speculation, but it seems a pretty reasonable speculation. But anyway, here any open XR PC headset will be entirely welcome. Now, what separates Remnant Protocol from other VR dogfighters is where you spend half your time in the game. This is going to be in a place called Sanctuary, a hidden base that functions like the ant farm in modern XCOM. The narrative is cheerfully frank about its inspiration. A benevolent monarch dubbed the Blessed Mother has been assassinated. An authoritarian faction known as the Usurpers has filled the void, and now the Loyalists trigger the title of the game, the Remnant Protocol, to fight back. Here you are both the Squadron Ace and the Rebel Commander, and you're forced to balance daring strikes with long-term survival of the cause. Between missions, you stare down a wall of grim choices. Do you funnel scarce credits into experimental weapons or build the hangar after losing 2 veterans in the last raid? Should you send operatives out to court a fringe faction, knowing the usurpers could inch closer by discovering Sanctuary every time you make a move? Pilots are mortal, one careless push into the flak, and your best wingmate is gone for good. Yet, the developers are keen to avoid what they call turn 50 doom loops. A disastrous op hurts, but it shouldn't leave you mathematically dead. There are ways to relocate, rebuild, fight another day, and live on. Now, every sortie feeds back into the grander strategy of the game. Wreck an enemy convoy in VR, and you'll capture salvage for the workshop. Fail to protect a supply depot, and your research tree slows to a crawl. It means there's a variety of ways to approach this game. You can go hard and, make yourself a bit of a target, or you can go slow and maybe leave it too long and the galaxy will sink further under the usurper's boot. No two campaigns then should unfold identically. And then there's procedural events, branching missions, and multiple minor factions that could really see to this, unique playthrough each time. The developers insist the story will always know when to tighten the screw. Now moving on, we come to dogfighting. This itself looks comfortingly familiar. Very much like I say, it's got a lot of similarities to TIE Fighter, in my mind the golden age of space games, and of course somewhat later titles such as Free Space 2, my favourite dogfighting game of all time. And some of these scenes, some of these environments really are reminiscent of that to me. Now in VR you can glance down and read analog gauges instead of the floating HUD widgets, a choice that really does trade instant clarity for tactile immersion. The team's philosophy here is pretty clear: a cockpit should feel like a real machine, even if that means your eyes leave the target for a second or two. HOTAS owners on PC will be able to map every dial and thruster, but Quest pilots aren't quite left behind. Although you won't be able to have a HOTAS, you'll still have standard controllers which can handle the pitch, yaw and throttle, which hopefully should have a good degree of responsiveness, something that would really need to be tested out, and hopefully if they get that right, they can really go a long way with this game. So yeah, this does harken back to the golden age of space games, and you'd have thought in the modern era we'd see a lot more VR-focused space combat games like this. Unfortunately, there hasn't been all that many. We had for a while Eve Valkyrie, which launched with fanfare only to fade away when the CCP swapped focus. Elite Dangerous, of course, remains majestic but hasn't received a VR-friendly expansion in years, and although it's still one of the best space games out there in terms of VR, it really isn't getting the support, the VR support that it needs. Against that backdrop then, Remnant Protocol really stands out for two reasons. First, it chases the dream of a narrative-driven cockpit-first campaign. Not merely an arena shooter, but a proper story with consequences. Second, it dares to graft on an XCOM-like metagame into that cockpit itself, acknowledging that space warfare is won as much in the planning room as it is in the pilot seat. So this is a dual aspect to the game, and hopefully resonates with the gaming community out there, the people who really want this type of game. Of course, there's a little bit of worry that just maybe the Quest hardware might not be up to the task. It's quite an ambitious task, and things might have to be watered down a little bit. But the developers have given some reassurances here, and every time we look at some of the trailers, it does look pretty nice. And then we know that we're going to get support on the Steam VR anyway, so hopefully we can switch up the settings there if needed. At any rate, after looking around the internet for quite a bit, looking at a few videos, checking out the trailers, looking at the various different previews and developer interviews out there, pretty much everything seems to be pretty encouraging about this game. The team talks openly about avoiding the lowest common denominator design, and that is key when it comes to this type of thing, because too many people have fallen into that trap. Far too many developers have gone down the lowest common denominator route, trying to appeal to the broadest possible audience. So it's very nice to see that Progenitor are not going in that direction. Also, though, just as keen to point out the importance of a gentle onboarding curve. In other words, don't make things too difficult up front. So that means the first missions will introduce power management one dial at a time. Early strategy turns will also limit variables until you grasp the stakes, and from there the complexity arises. And the promise is simple: by the time the credits roll, you not only have flown a load of harrowing sorties, you'll also have shaped the living resistance from a ragtag hope to a credible threat. Very much looking forward to seeing more on this, and it's good at last to have on the horizon a pretty bold and ambitious VR space game. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Do check out the other video on the screen right here if you want to watch that one. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Do take care.